Good evening. In tonight's conversation, I'm speaking to Jessica Tuck from Florida. Jessica has recovered from long COVID and is sharing her story this evening. Welcome, Jess. It's great to have you on the podcast. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Appreciate it.
Cool. Feel free to jump in and just share a bit about your journey pre-pandemic, what your health and fitness was like to your COVID infection and that experience.
Yeah, it's been a very crazy 5 years, I feel like, total. I got COVID right at the very beginning of the pandemic. It was March 12th of 2020. And so, unfortunately, to take everybody back there, everything was shutting down. The trade shows were just starting to shut down. I think here in the States, we had March Madness, like that was getting shut down. So yeah, right at the beginning is where I got it. So it's been a very intense, and I'm sure as everybody that's gone through it can be pretty intense for 5 years. Prior to getting sick, I was 27 going on 28, so pretty young at the time, and I would stand 10 toes down on I had a rock solid immune system. I used to brag about it to my family. I never got sick. So it was very out of left field when I got sick, and pretty much just declined from there. It was pretty much overnight. I think a lot of people with chronic symptoms in general or any sort of immune issues, there's kind of like a slower pace. Like you kind of start seeing symptoms after symptoms after symptoms, and it kind of develops into something. And for me, it was like, I always say running into a brick wall, or more like getting in a car crash, because it was like one day I was fine, went to bed, the next day I woke up and life has never been the same. And before I got sick, I was working multiple jobs, very active in the gym every day. So yeah, it was a pretty active lifestyle. And then as soon as I got sick, it was just fever and lung issues and about 30 symptoms. And at the beginning of the pandemic, you were only supposed to have like the main three. It was supposed to be like fever and I think some lungs and a cough. And I never had a cough. I was very hot, but never ran a fever, lost taste, lost smell. I'm trying to even think, oh my God, there was like 30 symptoms all at once. And so I feel like I've been a very weird case from the beginning. And I was always kind of a week or two ahead of the media. So no one has ever, I kind of went through it in such real time before any of it was known, before doctors knew anything. And I think especially, I kind of talk about it in sections. The first 8 weeks before I did end up in the ICU in the hospital was like, I would say like symptoms would jump around each day. I think that's the crazy part about COVID is it hits all your systems. So I could have respiratory one day and GI the next. And then I would have a sore throat, like horrible sore throat and sinus stuff. And it just kind of always kept me guessing. And doctors had no idea what was happening. And so I just declined really fast for about 8 weeks and ended up in the ICU with 2 blood clots in my lungs before that was even, before that was even a thing to look for, really. I had one doctor, that's how crazy it was, so in real time that my best friend was like, oh, I think I read an article, like young people were starting to like maybe see that. And so my doctor called some doctor friends in New York who had seen more cases. And he called me back and he was like, sure enough, they're just starting to see it. But even young people without any underlying conditions weren't supposed to really get sick from this. So from the jump, it was just like I said, a roller coaster, getting in a car crash. And I made it through the hospital, luckily, thank God. But with blood clots, you kind of have to live with them for a while. Your body has to dissolve them. The blood thinner that you get put on it doesn't dissolve them. Your body dissolves them. The blood thinner just stops your body from clotting more. And it was a pretty intense, 6 weeks after that. And I had a good week then. And I went to my best friend's wedding and I got COVID again. So I got the A and B. Yeah.
Sure.
So
strange, yeah.
I got the A and B strand within the first 5 months of the pandemic. And
Sure.
the second time I got it, it was all the hair falling out, and I had infections in my intestines. I had like crazy hormone issues. Just everything flared. So I'll stop there for a second because it was such a wild and intense, I would say like 8 months of the pandemic.
Sure. Yeah, you're only I'd say the second person I've spoken to firsthand who got COVID like right at the beginning of the pandemic and had to deal with long-term symptoms. Another is a friend who stays in South Africa, and she's been she's almost sick now for almost 5 years. Yeah. So it's incredibly sad to hear those cases. But I was going to ask, in terms of the blood clots, how does a doctor or the hospital test for blood clots in your lungs?
Yeah, they ran a D-dimer. Did they? Yeah, they ran a D-dimer, which just tests your kind of inflammation levels, I think. And those were like through the roof. And so they ran a MRI on my lungs. And before that, I'd been into doctors. They'd done x-rays. My, lungs were clear. They ran so many tests. I had so many blood panels, all this stuff. They couldn't figure out what was happening. So by the time I got to the hospital, I think that was the steps. It was D-dimer and the levels were very high. And then the MRI on my lungs. And so I had one in each chest. So one in each lung.
Wow.
Yep.
And how long did your doctor prescribe? Is it a GP or a specialist that you went to see?
It was just, a normal practitioner.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he sent me right to the hospital basically when I wasn't getting better. We got to the point where it was like, if you're not better, something is so seriously wrong. They put me on inhaler, on steroids, on everything. So, and both times I kind of, after the initial 3 weeks, which I think the more we kind of find out about COVID, the more it makes sense. But just, in real time, after like 3 weeks, my body like crashes.
Okay.
So both times. And so it's like, I'll have a couple days where my body fights the initial infection. And then I start to get like slightly better, and then it'll crash and everything will flare again. And I think the more we're finding out that COVID's kind of sticking around in our body, that makes a lot more sense. Because my doctor would be like, it's almost like you had like a reinfection. You know what I mean? Like that was our discussion at the time. Because my symptoms were just jumping so much. And then, he ended up sending me, straight to the hospital. But it was just, it was a roller coaster.
Sure. Out of interest, thanks so much for sharing, Jess. It's great to hear your journey battling the COVID infection and post symptoms. Firstly, I wanted to ask, how long were you on blood thinners for? And then secondly, what were some of your symptoms for the 3.5 years that you battled long COVID?
Yeah. I was on blood thinners for 6 months. I was on Eliquis. I don't know if that's if everybody does that or if that's a US thing.
I've done it for 10 months. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I was on 6 months of Eliquis. Thank goodness everything went fine with that. But then developed long COVID, after kind of my really intense 10 months, like 8 to 10 months, which wasn't a thing at the time. So I think that was an interesting transition of like, suddenly people with COVID were having like continuing symptoms. And I think at the beginning, the headspace was so much like, just make it through. Like long COVID wasn't supposed to be a thing. You were just supposed to make it through the initial infections. And I just thought blood clots, get through the blood clots, get through the infections. And then, so that was very, very challenging, as I'm sure it's for a lot of people, that once you realize, this isn't just a flu that we're going through. And suddenly now they're like, it's just continuing things. I had fatigue. I had a lot of fatigue. I was going to say, I always have to keep it on track in the timeline. There's so much that's happened. That I was like managing. It was okay. I was always having inflammation. I was probably at like a level 3 or 4 pain. Like I was always in some sort of pain, but it was a bit more manageable. I would have crashes. It was a little bit of a dip and crash, get a little bit better and crash, but it was definitely manageable for about like 8 months. And then I went into burnout. I think it had just been too much trauma to my body, too much, I had a crash that really just flared everything so bad. And the symptoms I really have are pain down my spine horribly. My lungs did get really hit. So I carry a lot of inflammation around my lungs and in my chest, and GI issues, severe headaches, a sore throat that comes every other week, and so bad you can barely talk. I had lost my smell for over a full year, a little bit over a year. I have it back now, but yeah, I definitely could not smell a single thing for over a year. So I kind of had a lot of that. And then I went into burnout, and that was horrible. That was absolutely horrible. I think psychologists really talk, it's when the brain kind of shifts. I really disassociated from my body. So that was hard because on a physical level, you're feeling everything almost to the nth degree, but your brain and you and your body are not really connected anymore. So you can kind of tell yourself to do move your arms all you want, but that's not going to happen. And that's kind of when I developed POTS and I developed chronic fatigue syndrome. So I got diagnosed with those. And that next year was pretty brutal. I was pretty housebound. There was just my cortisol was through the roof. You talked about brain fog before we've had discussion, and just, oh my gosh, brutal. I would be so terrified to do this because I'd be so afraid I'd lose, track of my words in the middle of sentences. Like at work, I just was so terrified to get on and talk because I just felt like I was gonna mess up. Sleeping, I would have insomnia. I obviously with POTS, it's just hard to be vertical a lot of times. I was pretty housebound for a good couple years there.
Wow.
Yeah.
And sorry, did you have to resign from work or work part-time, or what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I worked full-time. I was remote, which is the only way I could do it. There's no way I could go in for a job. But yeah, I did work remotely. Like I said, not well all the time. Sometimes I'd be, I could only stare at a screen for about 2 hours and I'd need a nap. I was working through the evenings a lot. I was just trying to get the work done, just to get it done when I could. A lot of naps. I needed a lot of sleep, chronic fatigue syndrome. And you feel like you're dragging 50 pounds of lead in your body. And I just couldn't believe how heavy your body feels. Which was crazy. It would take just to stand up in the shower without about passing out would be so tough. And I had so much trouble breathing. It was still like someone was stepping on my chest, and it was so tight. And I used to have to sleep with a pillow in my chest and in my back just so I could breathe when I was sleeping. So yeah, pretty intense. I do want to mention, because I know people are still going through a lot of the intense stuff as well. It was just, work was really, really tough. But I think mentally that's the challenge, is not everybody has the luxury of quitting jobs. And there is a struggle. I always say there's a struggle when you have to go back into real world life, and you're trying to I think the first year for me was so almost insane that you can put it in a insanity box. Who does that happen to? And I can kind of accept that, because it's that's once in a lifetime. That is insane. That will never happen. And when I had to go back into quote real life and work, and then your body doesn't hold up to what the standards or friends and going out and all that stuff, there's so much, I think, grief and pain in losing that. So yeah,
sure.
it can be a roller coaster for sure.
So I was interested to hear, you've mentioned that your journey was about 3.5 years, and
Yeah.
you've been recovered now for 1.5 years, which is
Mhm.
incredible to hear. So I'm very excited, or for you, I guess, to see that recoveries are happening. What were some of the protocols and treatments that you tried throughout that period of 3.5 years, and
Mhm.
what you feel like helped the most or got you to 100%?
Yeah, there was definitely a lot that didn't work. I even went to like a physical therapist. I was in a critical illness recovery program in Boston in a hospital there. And I think as far as physical therapy goes, I think graded exercise therapy has its time and place, but with chronic fatigue and like critical illness, like it just wasn't. I think they always they're grading you on a scale that you are never going to be able to maintain. Um, because it's not an upwards trajectory. Like every day for us is a little bit different. So that kind of didn't work. I think I took like supplements. Those actually really didn't work that much for me. I really did love was acupuncture. I think acupuncture was really great in just slowing down my nervous system. And it actually completely brought back my smell, which was awesome.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah. I've heard
Yeah.
a few long COVID or long haulers mention that acupuncture they feel better on. Yeah.
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 Because
Please
I think it's slowing down your nervous system a lot.
Mm,
And it's targeting that inflammation. So yeah,
mm,
that
mm.
does bring it back, which I really liked that. And then what kind of kickstarted my real healing, I would say I got into a neuroplasticity program, a brain retraining program. And that gave me really a lot of tools I needed to learn how to. Our brains kind of get on trauma loops. Like if any traumatic situation happens, and it doesn't have to be as serious as like me going into the hospital and all of that, because a lot of people, developed COVID and they had mild symptoms and then it's just persisted. But so it doesn't have to be some huge traumatic event, but if there's trauma is anything that can overwhelm your nervous system. So I think then our brains get wired to send certain responses, right? Because when the initial thing happens, your brain is supposed to, it is protecting you from that initial incident. But then, when your nervous system perceives that happening again, whether it is or not, it's firing that same, signal. And so, yeah, my body was just in this huge, basically thought I was dying every day. And it was just sending so much at my body. And it was shut down my vagus nerve, really shut down a lot of my brain capacity. I was in like freeze mode 24/7. And so the brain retraining really helped learn how to rewire some of those signals, some of the pain signals that I was having, just as like someone with fibromyalgia would have. Like signals can just kind of get crossed as well.
So what is fibromyalgia, out of interest here?
Yeah. Fibromyalgia is basically when the brain wires I'm not a doctor, so this is from what I know.
Okay.
So everybody do your own research as well. From what I understand, fibromyalgia is when the pain signals get rewired. So like I would have shooting pain down my spine and I would have it like radiating off of my spine. And so they kind of mentioned, I didn't get officially diagnosed, but they kind of mentioned it's a nervous system thing that I had some fibromyalgia there. And it would feel like I was on fire, like absolutely on fire. You could barely graze my back and it would double me over. So it's like the pain signals for what the pain is happening is not matching. Somewhere in your brain, it gets wired differently. So yeah, brain retraining was a great, great starting point for me to be able to rewire the signal that the brain is sending for the pain you're receiving in your body. So that was a really good start.
Yeah. Incredible. Jess, it's really interesting for me to hear a case like yours, because I have heard of this vagal nerve theory, I think, or vagus nerve theory, where people will buy vagus nerve stimulator devices that help basically reset your nervous system, and this vagus nerve that's supposedly got inflammation. I imagine that can be the case if there's inflammation around your body. But do you feel like that was the main thing that led to your full recovery?
I would say the two main things is the nervous system, which the vagus nerve is part of that. I think the vagus nerve stimulators, I think you just would have to be so consistent with it. You can, re-stimulate your vagus nerve and calm it down without purchasing something. But so that's totally doable. I would say the two biggest things is you have to focus on your nervous system and get out of fight or flight. Because if you are in fight or flight, it doesn't matter what supplements you take. It doesn't matter what you really do. If you're in fight or flight, you physically cannot heal.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like physically impossible to do. Your body will just kind of not absorb the nutrients. It won't, it won't really do anything. So you have to get out of fight or flight. And I think sometimes that's tough when we've been sick long enough, because you kind of forget what normal used to feel like, right? You get your new normal, you kind of forget. So you could be like, oh, I'm consider myself healed, but there's days I will wake up so calm and I'll be like, oh yeah, this is what it's supposed to feel like. Like you'll have random moments. I think still you just forget what that is supposed to feel like. So I think getting out of fight or flight is just, it is the most important thing. And the second thing, that I think the biggest part was reducing cortisol and inflammation, because that itself can wreak havoc. Even if it was not long COVID, inflammation in the body just does a lot of damage on different organs. And so those were probably the main two things. I did go a gluten-free diet and cut out really sugar. I eat dairy, but I know for a lot of people that's a trigger that they could cut out. But I did that for really a solid 6 months. And what was interesting was then it hit Christmas time and my mom was making a bunch of yummy snacks and stuff. And so I was eating a lot more sugar and gluten. And it took about 3 weeks, but my brain fog did kind of come back where I was.
Wow.
Yeah. So I do think for me, at least, everybody's a little bit different. You have different triggers for your inflammation. But for me, at least with my brain, I felt like food has been a big part in keeping my brain clear. And I don't consider gluten bad. And I don't think anybody should basically wire that into your brain that something is good or bad. I think it's just keeping your inflammation levels as low as you can and keeping your nervous system out of fight or flight.
Incredible. Yeah. What are some practical ways that someone would rewire their brain or calm their central nervous system?
Yeah. I think getting into your circadian rhythm as best as you can. I know we have to sleep when you're sick. You just have to sleep all the time, a lot. You have to rest up more. But I think a big one is try to go outside first thing in the morning when you get up, even if it's just dragging yourself to your porch or step outside or just to stand outside for 5 minutes, or if you can take a walk. Really getting that sunlight on your face, getting your circadian rhythm going back and trying to go to bed at the same time, trying to eat at the same time. I think there's always, deep breathing exercises, all that stuff can be a little bit harder when you're anxious to sit and meditate. So if sitting and meditating is too much, just do slow movements. Just do very slow movements, stretches, anything that will help calm your vagus nerve as well. That will help reduce some inflammation. Brain retraining, be conscious what you're telling your body. Be very, very conscious. Be conscious of if you're focusing on your pain. which is tough to do if you're in a lot of pain. But if you're focusing on the symptoms that you feel in your body, you're going to feel them more. Right. So doing that, I think I really implemented a lot of, it's simple, but things that bring you joy into the day. Just little things. If you could focus on one thing every day that brings you a little bit of joy. And I'm talking simple, like get in your car and drive around, go to the gas station and get a drink. Like something that's simple. It doesn't have to be big. Watch your favorite show. Just something that's going to bring you some joy. Talk to a friend that you like. Bring the joy back into your life and something else to focus on. And I think the more little joy points you can put back into your life, it really does help the mental rewire a lot.
Yeah. Amazing. So. It's very encouraging to hear. I'll be honest, since I've started hearing about this brain retraining kind of hypothesis or technique, I initially was quite skeptical. I thought, no, that just sounds like you're thinking your way to feel better, or curing a disease by your thoughts. And I was like, no, it's not, it can't be real. But then the more I thought about it, if our bodies are all connected, our brain is wired to everything, our gut produces chemicals that affect our chemical balance in our brains. And if you think about it, like if you have a painful experience that happens with, say, it's a relationship or a work thing or conflict or something, our brains can think of that moment weeks later, months later, and trigger that pain and that and it changes your emotions. And I just thought, man, the brain is so powerful, the way we can almost affect our moods by the way we think. And so I know there is a part of that, that makes a lot of sense. Even for someone battling, I guess, more mental health stuff, depression, anxiety, I found in my history in my 20s, dealing with some of that cognitive behavioral therapy really helped me. So it's basically the point is I'm much more, I think, open to the power of the mind and how that affects us physically. But in terms of the last year and a half, what does that look like for you? Did you progress back to, exercise at all at any point and things like that?
I really was able to get a lot of the pain signals rewired. And then I was able to kind of focus on the fatigue part, because that stuck around a lot longer for me and that just took a lot more time. But a year and a half ago, I really was able to come out of burnout. I mentioned, I really focused on my routine as much as possible, getting outside first thing in the morning, trying to take a small walk, even if it was to the mailbox and back, just building up a little bit of tolerance. I think movement in general, there's like two categories of it, right? There's one part where it's like your normal day-to-day, walking to the bathroom, walking to the fridge, that element of movement. And then there's another part of movement that's more like lifting weights and like a little more like graded exercise, right? So I just really started building up my stamina as much as possible. And I don't want people to think like, oh, I jumped. I'm talking, it was like baby steps, and like everybody else, like I could get to a certain point and then I would have to come all the way back down and start over. But I think your body gets used to it faster, and then you can kind of build. But it's not a straight shot. But I was able to do that and really work myself out of the fatigue part of it, which is great. And I came out of burnout about a year and a half ago, and which is interesting because I said that's like the mental part, and I swear it was the weirdest feeling. It was like my mind, my body, and me just all snapped back. And it was, I don't know how to explain it. It sounds insane, but that's how it felt. And the past year and a half, since I really built back up a lot of my stamina, I have been able to travel. Life is pretty normal, all things considered. My day-to-day work, I can get through work fine. I don't need naps in the afternoons. I can go hang out with friends. I can go take a walk. I can, just have life back, basically, where you're not thinking about the consequence all the time. If I do this, then I'm gonna have to rearrange my week, or I'm gonna have to, that's gonna hurt me for something else, and I can't do something else. So I think just to have my life back is really, the past year and a half has been that. And traveling, I've done some traveling, and I can walk airports now again without having to stop and sit down. And I just want everybody to know, like, I have been there. Like, I've completely been there. And it sucks. It's horrible. It's so defeating. It is so defeating. And when you keep crashing and you have hope and you keep crashing, like, I've so been there. So for me, like, I can confidently say the past year and a half that I really have had my normal life back. And that's not anything I even knew was going to be possible or not. I just somehow figured out a way to rehabilitate a little bit. But yeah, I want that for everybody, honestly.
Sure. Yeah. It's very encouraging to hear. I haven't heard a lot of success stories and a lot of recovery stories. So it's amazing to hear. I know so many people are battling firsthand now, a lot of my friends, and people that I've connected with online, through this podcast series. I was going to ask, in terms of the timeline of the pandemic, one of the narratives that I struggle to, converse with people online is that narrative that I mentioned a bit earlier, of the vaccine versus, like, long vax versus long COVID. And what was the timeline for you with your long COVID post-infection? I mean, obviously vaccines didn't exist at that point, beginning of 2020, but what made you want to get vaccinated, like, later down the line, and what did that timeline look like?
Yeah. I think I was sick. It was pretty much a full year before the vaccines came out. From like spring.
That you were sick.
Yeah. Because I got sick in March of 2020, and then I got the vaccine in April of 2021. So yeah, it was about a full year. I think I had been through so much. I think at the time with the vaccine, the talk had been really, that if you get it, that you can't get sick again. Yeah. And I think a lot of the verbiage changed. And as somebody who did have it seriously and went through it, like, that's frustrating. That was frustrating for me, because a lot of people hadn't even had COVID yet. And I had this whole traumatic, like, first year. And so I think I was holding on to any hope, right? There was, like, any hope. And I was pretty much like, I cannot go through this again. There is no way. And if there's a chance this vaccine will, I think anybody in my position, to be honest, like, if you had gone through the first year I had, you would be like, if there is anything that is going to either reduce my symptoms if I got this again, or, could stop it from hitting me again, like, you would probably do it. So I didn't really have that much hesitation, because that's just where my headspace was.
It's understandable.
Yeah. I was worried what it would do to my body if I could handle it. But I just, in the headspace, I didn't have any, like, there wasn't I'm not getting this, for the chance that symptoms would be reduced, or,
And did you find that it helped at all, or made the symptoms worse, or nothing? What was your experience?
I didn't notice anything. I got, in the US, I got Pfizer.
Yeah. Is that 2 doses?
Yep. So the first one, the dead arm. Oh my God, I forgot about that. I remember the dead arm the first time. I know a lot of people when you get the shot. The first one I didn't notice too much. And then the second one definitely flared a lot of my kind of typical COVID symptoms, but it wasn't anything, like, out of the norm. So I was fine, and life went on. So, yeah, that's my story with it.
Wow. And what do you do for work now, Jess?
I'm in marketing.
Okay, incredible.
Yep.
That's
I'm
awesome.
a marketing manager for a company here out of Florida.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah, I work remotely as well still, which I like it that way.
I'm sure, yeah.
But I think if people can get remote jobs, it is good for people like us that have some symptoms. We can manage it a little bit better. So I definitely feel for people that have to go into offices right now.
Yeah. I relate to what you said earlier. I kind of just battled on for 2 years because I didn't have a choice. I don't have any other source of income
Yeah,
besides my job. I was doing gigs as like a part-time musician at the time, but now even that, like with energy capacity and pacing and post-exertional malaise, you'll know that term of like post-exercise, you just crash severely. So I can't do any gigs, lift heavy gear or anything. And I eventually just went down to 3 days a week now last year. And I found that more manageable for me, but it
sure.
has been such a journey of going from all this sick days, unpaid leave, eventually saying to my boss, hey, please, can I work from home 2 days a week just to help with energy capacity? Because just driving to the office and traffic and all of that can use up your energy.
Do you feel like you have POTS or chronic fatigue syndrome as well? Or is it just the
yeah,
like post?
I've got the severe fatigue, yeah. So I wouldn't call it ME/CFS per se, because I know that's it's a very similar it's like they're under the same umbrella, I guess. Long COVID, ME/CFS, like the fatigue is the same, or similar, but I wouldn't class it ME/CFS, if that makes sense. But no, POTS I haven't actually experienced, to be honest. The heart rate, and I think it's to do with your heart rate rapidly going up when you stand up. No, I haven't experienced that, but I have more dysautonomic I guess symptoms of heat. What's the right word to say?
Like a heat intolerance.
Or thermal regulation issues in my body. So now in summer, I get really sweaty and I'm dripping, and everyone on the table is like, "What's wrong, Chris?" I'm like, "I have no idea. Like, I'm just feel really hot." And in winter, I've always had cold toes and hands, and I can't tell if it's worse. It might be a little bit, but it's also like it's hard to know, based on
Oh my gosh.
lived experience.
I would be in sweatpants. Like I couldn't regulate a temperature either. Like my head would be so hot. I would I'd sleep in like a sweatshirt and like blankets, and I'd have to have a fan on my face because if not, like I'd get way too hot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Totally.
Okay.
It's hard to regulate. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. For sure. Yeah. But basically I've also got what I think is vascular inflammation. I think there's residual spike protein around my body. So I've got all these aches and pains. I've had them every day for almost 3 years now. So I'm trying the McCullough protocol at the moment, which is the more enzyme-based protocols to get rid of these little microclots and dissolve the spike protein in your tissues and blood. But that's a year process that I'm going to be on now, and hopefully it'll help me a bit. But yeah, thanks so much for sharing your story tonight, Jess, or afternoon for you in Florida. And in closing, is there anything you'd say to someone who's in that boat right now, ME/CFS, long COVID, and really battling and struggling physically and emotionally? What would you say to encourage someone like that?
I would say to just continue to have hope. Your body responds to your belief systems. This is another little thing about the brain. If you don't believe you can heal, you won't. Our brains will either, whatever your core belief is, it'll either accept, distort, or push out that belief. So if you identify as a sick person, then you can't be healthy. That's the core belief, right? So I think it's having hope, knowing you're not alone. I've completely been there. I've been so in a horrible spot for years. And like I said, pretty bedbound. And I think I had one person that no one had healed from long COVID at the time when I was doing it, but there was somebody that had healed from some other autoimmune issues. And I just really held on to that. And maybe that's partly why I'm here at this point, is because I just so believed that if somebody else could do it, I could do it. And I think it's weird that kind of got me out, and the universe has put me in this position now, that hopefully if I can be that for someone else, just to say, hey, look, it's even possible. I think that's what a lot of us are just looking for. With long COVID, is just being like, if it's possible, if one person can get out of it, then it's totally possible for you. So yeah, I would just say have hope, believe. And I know hope is hard if you keep crashing and it just feels like that. It kind of gets harder and harder, but just know it is totally possible. I'm standing here and I'm not anybody more special than anybody else, but you absolutely can heal all of this. It's totally possible, and you can get your life back. And I think 2025, I hope, is the year for everyone to do that. So, yeah.
Incredible. Thank you, Jess, for those words. It's very encouraging. And yeah, in closing, where can people listening follow you on your journey and see a bit of your journey with long COVID?
Yeah, I'm mostly on Instagram. It's _ just keep healing. So
awesome. I love it. It's like just keep swimming, but just keep healing. Is it Finding Nemo?
Yeah, you're catching on. That's
reference. Okay, that's good. That's good. Cool. I like it. That's awesome. One of my favorite movies, actually. Yeah.
I think it's very fitting for everybody.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much for your time again, Jess, and have a great afternoon ahead.
Thanks so much, Chris.